Whatever.
For starters, Anne, can you tell us a little bit about your family of origin, your parents, grandparents, siblings?
Well, I grew up in England, about 20 miles west of London. Windsor was the closest town. We lived in a funny kind of area. There wasn't a village and it wasn't a town. It grew up around the movie studios, which my grandfather had been involved with J. Arthur Rank building. My father had spent most of his life overseas, living in the south of France and in Alexandria. And he spoke 5 languages. My mother came from the north of England. Was a very sweet, loving, wonderful mother. But she hated living in the south. She was always longing to move back to the north, but she never did. That answer your question?
Yeah.
It does.
And we were going to ask, how did your dad get into show business?
Oh, my dad got into show business because he had a friend who was a conductor, worked in the theaters in London, and I don't remember the details. And my father had a wonderful tenor voice, and he persuaded him to take part in a musical. But at the same time, he was offered a job as a Mideast correspondent for the Dunlop Rubber Company. And because he was so brainwashed by his father that he had to work and it was terrible to be on the stage, he went off for the job. And I think for the rest of his life, regretted it, because he had suddenly had a personality of show business, and I think he never felt fulfilled, although he had a very successful career managing the movie studios, and certainly made my life extremely interesting.
Yeah.
For 20-some years. You want me to
I
say
wanna-
that?
Well, I want to ask you, you said your mother never got a chance to go back to the north of England, but I think you were telling us that you and she and your siblings spent some time there to escape the bombings, the Blitz in London.
She went back there, visiting her father often, but I meant she never settled
get
to live there. Yeah, we went back, stayed with my grandfather when the worst of the bombing was on in London, because we felt it would be safer up there. My father stayed home to work, but those are probably the happiest early memories I have, staying in the countryside in what is now a national park. In Derbyshire, actually.
Fantastic.
My grandfather was a wonderful, he looked like Santa Claus. He adored children. He had an art collection and all kinds of wonderful things in his house, and a beautiful garden. He loved to take us around and show us all these treasures. So I have very good memories of him. Sadly, he died when I was 10, I think, as a result of prostate surgery, which never should have happened. It was a surprise to everybody.
Wow. So even though you had to leave London in your home with your mother under terrible circumstances because of bombings, it was one of the most enjoyable parts of your childhood. That's amazing.
Yeah, because, well, I guess we didn't feel so threatened there, although actually while we were there, they did bomb Sheffield, which was not very far away. But earlier, we would go to bed every night and wonder if we would get bombed or we'd survive the night.
Unbelievable.
And I think that stayed with me always in a way, you always have that feeling.
Prepared for disaster.
Yeah.
Comes in handy around now.
Right.
So the next question is, when did you leave the UK by yourself for the United States? And where did you settle?
Well, I left in 1959 after I'd been engaged to be married and we broke it off. And my parents wanted me to have some adventure, I guess, take my mind off it. And my father's brother was in the British diplomatic service, and he was on his way to Costa Rica. And so I went on I think it was the Queen Mary, with him and his wife to New York. And we were just a few days in New York, and then they went off to Costa Rica, and I went to Virginia to stay with a friend of my mother's who had lived in England during the war, was our neighbor. And that, I won't go into the details of that, but it was the whole thing was very, very bizarre. She was living on a farm. She'd killed a deer a few days earlier, and we had venison every single day. I think I was there. And she destroyed all the pictures of her husband and didn't want to talk about England. And then her son thought she got me to stay there because she wanted to marry him off to me. And it was all really ridiculous. Luckily, I was able to get out of there, and I got the train, went to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where my father had a very, very dear friend who was a music professor in Ann Arbor, and I stayed with them. He was able to get funding to have me he was writing a book about the first bell, and I was able to do that. And he used to give concerts on the bell, and they what did they call it? I'm a blank on the name of what they called it.
Carolyn.
Thank you. So he did concerts on the Carillon. People used to stand outside in the square and listen. And I met a lot of interesting people on the faculty there. Some of them I remember, especially an organist. So that was a good time in Ann Arbor. And then I got back on the train and I went north and into Canada, and ended up in Vancouver, stayed with another business associate of my father's, who also offered me a job that I didn't, at that time, I had no desire to stay in Canada. I often wonder how my life would have been if I'd stayed there. And I went to Victoria, where my grandfather had two sisters. And the oldest one and I just bonded, just wonderful. And we stayed in touch for the rest of her life. Much later, I went back and I got lots and lots of relatives through the two of them in Canada. And not so long ago, I met a cousin or a second cousin when we went back to Vancouver on a trip.
Well, as you worked your way down the West Coast, you apparently wound up in Hollywood and had your picture taken with someone famous. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I took the Greyhound bus from Vancouver to San Francisco, and I don't know exactly when it was I went to Hollywood, but again I had contacts there through my father, and I got an invitation to visit Paramount Studios where Elvis was making a movie. And so I got my photo taken with Elvis, and
That's kind of
that
fun.
was fun.
Yeah.
He was surrounded by all these people, and
Did you meet the Colonel?
yeah, well, the Colonel was there. Yeah, the Colonel was there. I think it was called Blue. Was it Blue Horizon or Blue Hawaii or Blue,
Blue
something?
Hawaii.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you meet your first husband, Ernest Baele? And why did you have two weddings and live in Orkney?
Well, when I was in San Francisco, I roomed with a woman who was working at USC nursing school, and she took a couple of months off, and we drove in her car all through the Southwest, and then we went into Mexico, and we were totally fearless. Then we were young.
That's standard for you, it seems like.
But luckily she spoke fluent Spanish. We had all kinds of adventures, but nothing bad happened.
Good.
But somewhere along the line, we met somebody who told me about summer school at the University of Mexico City, which was relatively new, I think, in those days. We're talking about 1959, I guess. And so after I came back and I had a couple of little jobs, I decided, why not go down there? So I went. Ended up Mexico City with nowhere to stay.
Oh my God.
I ended up rooming with a German family, which wasn't the way to learn Spanish, but I don't remember now how I met them. Anyway, I went through summer school, and then for $2 a day, you could get a hammock on the beach in Acapulco. So I went with these friends I'd made at the university, and they were on their honeymoon. And so they took me and another woman with them down to Acapulco, and we found this place where they slung a hammock that we slept in on the beach, and we got 2 meals a day. And there I met Ernest, who was extremely glamorous and tall and handsome, and I just fell for him. I didn't know what I was doing at all, really. Crazy in retrospect, but anyway, I was happy at the time.
That's good. Well, then after you two, excuse me, were married, you came back to Larkspur and lived in Larkspur for a while.
He was a speech and hearing therapist working for the Livermore School District. We lived in Livermore for a while. Well, first of all, we lived in a converted garage and then we moved to Livermore, and we bought a little house in a new neighborhood, and he continued teaching there. Well, I guess that's where he was teaching 4th grade, and he loved teaching 4th grade. That was the best year we ever had. but he'd been over here to some kind of convention, I guess, some gathering in Mill Valley, and said that's where I wanted to live. So and I was very pregnant at that point. And he found this house in Larkspur in the canyon. That was in the early 60s. So Larkspur was full of flower children and communes and really fun. You know, I loved that. I wished my husband had been more free thinking. You know?
Oh,
But,
did you ever run into Janis Joplin? Who
I
lived
did.
up the
I
street?
did
You
once.
did?
Yeah, yeah. I remember that.
Oh my gosh.
They were all, and we had a wonderful community feeling there. A whole group of us, you know, were liberal minded, and we wanted to change the city council. And you know, I was very involved in all that, and it was fun, and we were successful. You know, we really got things changed around.
Can you think of something you changed in Larkspur?
In Larkspur? Well, the whole sort of members of the city council changed, and later I was involved with a group trying to get after school care for the children as elementary school, and we were called a bunch of communists, and but we were successful with that. We did get after school care.
Wow.
Seems strange now, you know, that was unusual, that it was
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
Well, you have traveled a lot, and at one point you met Prince Philip. How did that come about?
Oh, that was later, 1981, I think it was. I was involved with Joan Baez's father, Al, because a good friend of mine worked for him, and he worked for this international environmental organization. And so he made me a member of that organization and a member of his education committee. And we went off to New Zealand, the three of us, and we spent about a week or so in Fiji, traveled all over, met all kinds of people who were involved with this organization, and then ended up in New Zealand, in Christchurch, where they held the meetings. And then we traveled around a bit after that. What I remember is going to a sheep station, seeing them shearing the sheep, and during the break, driving across the island to a B&B, and there's a notice on the door saying, I'm not home, go in and make yourself comfortable. I always remember that. I got an article published in the Pacific Sun at that time, talking about that experience.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Friendly folks.
Yeah, no, New Zealand was interesting. It's great.
And how about Prince Philip?
Oh, yeah. Well, at the
Him.
at the meeting, he had been invited, I guess. So he came. They had a cocktail party for him, and we all got to meet him. And he was very charming, and that was good.
Real Prince Charming.
Yeah, he was.
Well, what brought you to UU? And what sort of involvement?
Well,
you have?
what brought me to UU is because my first husband, Ernest, was a UU, had even thought about becoming a UU minister. He grew up in Davenport, Iowa. And I think his parents were Catholic, or certainly his father, who'd come from Belgium, was Catholic. So I don't remember how he'd become a UU, but we were living in East Bay, and so he took me to the Berkeley church, and we used to go there for several years. I used to help with the babies once a month, I remember. Raymond Cope was the minister. I really enjoyed going to those services, and my first two children were christened there. They had a beautiful ceremony with a rose. I have really happy memories of the time we were involved with that. And when we moved over to Marin, we kept going back over there for a while, but it was just too much with the children. I wanted to get more involved with the local UUs. So
Good move.
Yeah.
yeah.
And how did you meet the love of your life, John? And how did his interest influence yours?
Well, I met John because a small group broke off from the UUs, and I never got involved with the politics of church, so I don't remember what the reason was. I think something to do with the RE. But the Robinsons started this little group of Southern Marin, and we met at the Strawberry Rec Center. And John was active member of that little group. I think there were about 25 of them. And Alexandra was living with me at the time, she'll remember. And I think we read in the local paper that John was going to talk about his time with us during the civil rights movement. So we went to hear his talk, and I don't know, I just thought he was the most interesting, wonderful person. And so I tried to think how I could get to know him better. So we were all invited for some party, and I asked him to give me a ride. And
Good move.
I don't know, very quickly after that, I remember being on the beach, and he bringing me flowers and chocolates and whatever, which
he liked you too.
which wasn't his kind of thing, really. But he really courted me. We started living together pretty quickly. And at the time, he was recovering from, his brother had died, his sister had died, and Betty, the woman that he lived with for 20 years, had got pneumonia and died very unexpectedly. She was older, she was quite a bit older than John. And he lived in Mill Valley in her home for a long time on Marion Avenue. No, I mean, John and I just clicked, or whatever you do, it was just right for both of us. So I had a wonderful 20 years with him. And he'd had such an interesting life, and he was such a very, very caring, giving person. And a wonderful photographer. I mean, he had just an incredible eye for clicking at the right moment. And it was so interesting being with him. And I met all of Cesar Chavez's family a number of times. And then I met John Lewis I've jumped the gun.
That's okay.
Kind of follow.
You got to talk about the kiss then.
So John knew John Lewis, and we had been. My grandkids went to Waldorf School, and the school had promoted this talk of where John Lewis was really promoting his graphic novel about his life. And so he recognized John, and they talked, and then John introduced me, and he put his arms around me and kissed me. And I've never kissed anyone with such a leathery That's what I remember. Incredibly clever, like he'd never, he'd been outside on the farm all his life. But he was lovely, he was sweet. So that was a special moment, certainly.
Can you see us? Because Jim, all we see is a big black screen. Is that what everybody sees? Oh, there we go.
Hmm.
You're muted, so I can't see what you
Gone
say.
now?
Yeah, there
Oh.
you are. Okay.
Very good.
I was supposed to be putting up, sharing the, one of the photos. You've never asked about the,
Yeah,
I don't know if they have gone up.
yeah.
No, we haven't seen.
We're not quite ready yet.
Well, we put up that one when we talked about the church more, yeah.
Right.
oh, the first one. Okay.
Mhm. Well, do you want to talk any about the hard times that you have experienced and what that was like for you?
Yeah, well, right after I met John,
Oh, here's the
my
pictures.
daughter Marquetta, who was actually 23 at that point, took an overdose on Christmas Day in 1993, and she had been diagnosed mentally ill, but they never really had a definite diagnosis. She'd been, very good student, tennis player, lovely looking girl, had looked like she had it all going for her, and then in the last year of high school, she kind of fell apart. And, I always hoped that they would find the right medication or that something would happen, but it didn't. So, then the times living with that on, you always jumped every time the phone rang, and knew what she was going to do next, because the behavior was pretty bizarre. So that was hard time. And then getting divorced when I had 3 teenagers was not exactly easy. And I'd never really taken care of the finances and all those things by myself. But,
Oh, wow.
I managed. We did fine.
You're so resilient.
The girls went off to college, and so, we did all right. I had an interesting life in those days because I was involved with the Environmental Forum and very much involved with the schools, wrote the newsletter for the Kentfield schools with an English friend for years and years. I used to listen to the children. They used to come and tell me stories, and then we made a little book, and I loved those years.
Can you see the picture now?
Yeah, do you want
Yeah.
to scroll up a little bit? Or, yeah. Now here's a picture of Anne when she was about the time you got on the train, right? Or is that about the time?
No,
With the long braids.
No, with my long braids, that was when I was
Isn't she cute?
8. When I was 8, because I cut my braids when I went to boarding school.
Aha.
Yeah. And there are the 3 girls.
My daughters, yeah.
Yeah.
Very 70s picture.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Then there's my granddaughters.
And this is a collage she made at one of the UUCM art events. Pretty cool.
Well,
Larry, you're
I
supposed to
was
be
on
this
the
great
art
woman.
committee, and we used to put on workshops. Lorraine will remember, and Mary, and anybody else who was around in those days. We did tie-dyeing, I remember, and collage, and all kinds of things.
Do you want to talk about the death of your youngest daughter and the vision that you saw?
Oh, yeah, about 2 weeks after my daughter died, I saw all these colored lights. It was I think, I don't know if I was in bed, but it was late in the evening. Saw these colored lights. And then I could have felt this kidney shaped something going up through the room. And it was kind of scary, you know. But then I heard a voice saying, "Don't worry, I'm fine," which was, you know, it's a wonderful thing to have heard back from somebody who's just died. I don't fear death at all. I think because of that, you know, and it was, of course, wonderfully reassuring to know that she was okay. I know, however, why ever you get that, you know, I don't know, but maybe it's just wishful thinking. But anyway, it was a
So
wonderful
comforting.
experience.
Yeah.
Did you have some similar kind of experience after your oldest daughter died?
My oldest daughter, Kira, was diagnosed with cancer, and she lived about 9 months after the diagnosis. The last few weeks she went back home, and I spent a good deal of time with her. All family all rallied around, and the Waldorf school teachers rallied around. She had wonderful hospice care in the city.
How old was she then, Anne?
Hmm?
How old was she at the time?
She was 53, I think. Alexandra would know. But anyway, when I used to go and lie on the bed beside her, and we looked out towards the French doors and out to the wonderful view of the city. And I just felt the presence of my mother. It's hard for me to talk about that. I just felt that she was saying, you know, don't worry, I'm waiting for her. And Kira was incredibly brave, certainly in my presence. Right up until, I mean, she and I used to walk the bike path in
every day.
Sausalito every Friday, up until a couple of months before she died. She went off to Florence for a vacation, which she'd always dreamed of having. And she even went to London about a month before she died.
Wow.
To a family meeting. So she really put up a fight. But I miss her tremendously, because we used to see each other a lot, because she lived in the city. She was a very interesting, unusual person.
Yeah. I remember seeing her at church, and she'd always wear, she looked like Frida Kahlo. I mean, she'd wear
sure.
flowers. And
She always
just beautiful.
wore wild clothes, and
Yeah.
My first husband moved to San Miguel Allende in Mexico, and Kira loved going down there, and she used to buy all these Mexican clothes and pillows and various things.
Yeah. Well, you can't see it from here, but Anne's garden is amazing in Sausalito, just full of flowers and whimsy and color.
And so is her home.
Yeah, beautiful art everywhere. It really reflects her spirit. And we just wonder what gives you joy now and the strength to carry on, and what inspires you, or what wisdom do you have to pass on us people?
Well, I think I'm naturally optimistic. My sister-in-law even recently was telling me that I was optimistic when I was young,
Oh, really?
which interested me. I think partly because I grew up during a war and you sort of lived one day at a time. And you had this sort of British spirit of making the most of it.
Carry on.
Carry on, yeah. And I just have a lot of gratitude for where I live, and so many good things have happened to me. I'm still meeting interesting people, and I have a lot of wonderful friends in Sausalito, and I've so much good things to be thinking about. And with John gone, I mean, he was ready to go. He'd lived a good life. He would have been 90 not too long after he died, and he didn't, he lost his memory. It was hard. With Kira, it's different, and the fact that they went within a month of each other was certainly not an easy thing, but I don't know how I got through it, but I did. My friends certainly rallied around, and Alexandra was wonderful, and my grandchildren are here.
Well, if people have questions that they want to ask you, are you
That's
are
fine.
you game?
Oh yeah, I'm
Okay.
game.
Let's see if we can change our screen view. Oh yeah, here's
Oh yeah,
let's
we
see,
should
do you
show
want to go
that.
to the top, Jim?
Can't seem to get to the top. There it is.
This was a poem your children wrote on
Alexandra and Kira wrote it, yeah.
on the occasion of,
My marriage to John.
yeah.
Actually, it's an Aaron Neville and Linda Ronstadt duet.
Really?
Yeah, so you can hear the real version. It's called "I Need You." It's the same name. And Kira and I just had a great time rewriting all the words. So
this-
the idea in the song is that, the man and the woman take turns saying, to each other the reasons they need each other. So we had John is such a character, and of course having this English mother. So we had a wonderful time thinking up different reasons they would need each other.
Shall I read the first two stanzas? Because it's kind of tiny print. Want me to?
Yeah,
I'll just read the first two.
Alexandra should sing it too.
You want to? Well, you don't have it. You can't see it probably,
Do
Alexandra.
you remember
Or I'd
it?
let you sing it.
I think I can pull it off.
Oh, good.
All
Fantastic.
right.
What a sport.
Don't need no fry-ups greasing me. Don't need no football on the TV. Don't need no hot dogs or ham hock stew. Tell you what I do need. I need you. So of course that was Mom singing.
Yeah.
So then John would respond, don't need no morning tea in a cup. Don't need no veggie burgers for my sup. Don't need no bananas or tofu. Tell you what I do need. I need you.
That's so
great.
cute.
Thank you.
I gotta read the third stanza though. Maybe you could do one more because it says
Can you sing it?
talks about Unitarians.
Yes, yeah. So the third time what they do is they're alternating lines. So John always wore caps, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. The tune changes on this first, if I can remember it. I need you like a head needs a cap. I need you like a gal needs a lap. I need you like Unitarians need issues. Need you, need you, need you. I need you.
That's really sweet.
All right.
Brava.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Well, I think this photo by the bridge here is wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
A
great.
great photo, of course. Maybe John took his own photo, huh? I don't know. You're
Yeah.
No, that's not a selfie.
Well, Alexandra probably took them. I can't remember. Did you take them, Alexander?
She's muted.
Yeah, those are all our photos when we were together.
Actually, there's two of them right there.
Yeah,
At the bottom also at the same location.
oh yeah.
Wait a minute, it looks like the ship is sinking back there. What is that?
Either that or a giant shark.
Whale.
Oh,
It's a rock.
Yeah, it's right under the bridge.
It's either a rock or the Titanic. I can't tell.
It does look like a ship, thank you.
And how many grandchildren are there and how old are they?
The oldest one, Nina, will be 27,
Ooh.
amazingly, in July. Her sister is 3 years younger. They both live in San Francisco right now. Then there's Davin, who just turned 19, Alexandra's daughter. And she was living with me for a little while, which was lovely. She's a freshman at UC San Diego.
Right.
She's home on Zoom. And then I have a lovely, lovely grandson who's 13. Also lives in the city, goes to the Waldorf school there,
Tristan.
and makes videos, plays the harp,
Does magic.
does magic, yeah. And yesterday I was we were both lying under a willow tree, and we saw a great big, probably a hawk up really at the top of a tree. And he was taking pictures with my phone, and that was really fun. So he likes to go for walks, and we have these absolutely wonderful conversations.
You see Tristan is here, I see, joining us.
Yeah.
He is?
Yeah.
Hi.
And a question, your first husband, had you divorced him before you met John?
Sorry, did he what?
Had you divorced your first husband before you met John?
Yes, yeah, I divorced. I was 10 years single
Oh, okay.
before I met John. But I met an artist called Mark Luca up at the church, and we were together for 5 years. And then we decided to split up, and I met John soon after that. But Mark also, was a really interesting person. I had a wonderful time with him, but he was not marriage material.
Jim, you have a question?
Actually, a comment. I'm just so impressed with the remarkable life of adventures and experiences. One of the themes that pulls it together is the arts, the paintings, the garden, the music, and just photography, a life filled with arts.
Well, when I'm gardening, I feel like I could be painting a painting. I look at where I put the plants and what colors and shapes, and
And it's kind of the influence of her grandfather, maybe, who was so, he was stifled in his artistic expression, and you really express.
oh,
You can express yourself.
my mother's father was the one who had an art collection, and but I grew up in a household that was, so full of it. My mother read a lot. We talked about film a lot. I met all the film stars of the day. We went to the theater all the time. So I was very caught up in that as a teenager.
Margie, you had a question? Margie, did you have a question? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand, sorry.
Who's this
Look
green
at
person?
Tristan with
Oh.
his screens there.
There you are, Tristan.
That's great.
That's funny.
If
There
you
he
put
is.
on gallery, we can
Oh,
see
now he's
the
not.
other people.
Anything else?
Tell the story about your 2 marriages. I love that story.
A story about what?
The 2 married.
When you and Dad got married twice.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, we decided that it would be better just from a legal standpoint to get married here. So we found a judge, and we were living in the East Bay. And we had 2 couples and another friend of mine, Johnny, who had lived in Sausalito with her when I first lived here. And so we went up Mount Diablo, and we had this little ceremony, and then we also did a Jewish ceremony with a stomping on a glass,
Well, why
because
did you do that?
one of the couples was Jewish, or that came with us. And then, my family had planned this fancy English wedding. And at the time they were making Caesar and Cleopatra at Pinewood with, who was the actress who was in there? Elizabeth Taylor, yeah. And so they borrowed the tent from the set, and it was put up in our garden. And so we had this quite big wedding and service in the local church. But I mean, when Ernest and I arrived at my home, and my mother said, I don't know where, Ernest was going to sleep till you're married. And we said, it's all right, we're married. And they took it very, very well. But I did some terrible things. I'm looking back as a parent, I don't know how they were so accepting of all these things I did. But
Very modern.
everybody was fine with the wedding except my uncle, and he was upset about it. But other than that, it was okay.
When we were growing up, they always celebrated both anniversaries.
Oh, that's funny.
Good plan.
Well, we haven't talked about Orkney, which was Ernest got a Fulbright exchange in 1963, I think it was, 63, 64. And we spent a year in the Orkney Isles of Scotland, which is off the north coast of Scotland. And that's one of the very, very best years of my life. I absolutely loved it there. It was very wild. At that time, you could only get there by boat. And I think it was one plane during the week, but you couldn't we thought when we heard about it, we could go off travel in the weekends, which there was no way you could get on and off on the weekend. They put Ernest in charge of a little country school.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And then the teacher got sick, so he had an assistant who'd never lived there. The 2 of them, completely changed the school, with their different ways of doing things.
But Anne, didn't it rain there constantly?
No, not constantly. It was windy. There were there hardly any trees there.
Oh,
But it didn't rain all that much, as I recall. But we got to know so many people there. People were incredibly hospitable.
And you're still friends with them, right?
Well, I've only got one friend left now, sadly. They've all gone. I mean, this is so long ago.
Yeah.
But we knew, our closest friends were the artist and the writer and the, people in the arts. But we knew that, the people who ran the post office, people who had the local store, the local farmer, you know, the whole community. Then there was, I loved it because in England it's so class conscious. And up there it wasn't, you know, or much, much less so.
Huh.
So we really, you know, once they decided we were okay, we really felt part of that community. And it was, in many ways, I wish I could have spent my whole life there.
Wow.
Who had gotten the job there, working there?
Scotland.
Now I'm
Who
gonna
was
have to go
working-
visit there, Ann, for sure.
Yeah.
Who was working there? Which
You know,
one?
Ernest, he,
Oh, Ernest,
they put
uh-huh.
him in charge of this little country school. I
Wow.
think he had 6 students in his class, and there were more in the other.
Is this before you had kids?
I had I had a miscarriage while I was there.
Oh,
And there, you know, the local doctor would come to the house, and you know, he became a good friend. And they, before we left, they were going to have a big send off for us, and then I had this miscarriage, so that didn't happen. But I went back a bunch of times, and I took John back there in the 90s sometime, I guess was the last. But it's a very, very, very rough crossing by boat from the north of Scotland. But that's the nicest way to get there.
What's the name of the island again? I'm sorry.
Orkney.
Orkney?
Orkney. It's below Shetland, between the north of Scotland, and Thurso is the nearest Scottish town, I think.
Well, I suppose John took some pictures while you were there. no doubt.
Yeah. But he didn't take many pictures the last 10 years or so. And for Alexandra's wedding, I had to pretend that I wanted to learn how to print so that he would take pictures and gave me lessons on how to print. And he got some good pictures, didn't he?
He did.
yeah.
I mean, good pictures of their wedding.
I have a memory of going to Orkney because our parents took us one time. And so this ferry crossing, I had never been on a ship that was listing that much. And I remember that it was tilting so far that everything was flying off the tables, like the salt and pepper shakers, everything was just sliding off. It's one of my memories of going to Orkney.
It was very rough. And then the first time we went, your car was lifted by a crane onto the boat. And the last time we went, it was a drive on boat.
How did the people make a living there? And how many people were on the island?
There were, I think I'm right, at that time there were 22,000. At one time they had a very, very thriving egg industry. They exported a lot of eggs. There was the Highland Park brewery, not brewery, distillery, made Scotch whiskey. There were a lot of cattle, which it was too cold to have the cattle out in the winter, so they were all housed inside in the winter. There was some sheep, and then there was a lot of fishing, and lobster was very popular. A lot of people.
That was the art scene.
That was so it was a thriving community, and then they found oil offshore.
Oh God.
And unlike Shetland, they kept it, very strict rules about what they could do in Orkney itself, so they didn't develop it that much more. The oil stuff was offshore.
Well, it looks like our time is up. Is that right, Jim?
It would seem that way. We have time for one last question. We have 30 seconds.
Oh, there's one in the chat here. What kinds of jobs did you hold?
Oh, jobs.
Jobs.
Steve?
Well, my first jobs were for J. Arthur Rank when I worked in what they called the story department, where I would read manuscripts and stories from people who just sent it in. Anything that was sent to that department, and then write a brief summary and say whether I thought it would be made into a movie or not, could be made into a movie or not. There were a team of us who did that. That was fun. So I always loved to read. I've always loved to read.
Still reads a lot.
Yeah. When I got here, I don't know if I can even remember but I know I worked for the Liberty Insurance Company downtown San Francisco.
And she had 3 daughters.
And well, then I did a ton of volunteering in the community. I worked for the Volunteer Center. I was on the board of the Environmental Forum, and I worked in this, volunteered a lot in the schools. I can't remember all the things I
And
did.
the Pastoral Care Committee.
Oh, well,
For how
yeah,
many years?
we've never really talked about my involvement with the church, which
Yeah.
was, I was on the Pastoral Care Committee for a long time, and also on the Art Committee. And I have a ton of wonderful memories of the Art Committee with Carolyn Planakis. We put up a great many exhibits. Always around Christmas time, we'd try and get makeup exhibits from members of the congregation. I remember one year we had everybody decorate a paper bag. And we put all the
That's
paper
fun.
bags up in the lobby.
And then when did you get to Sausalito? When did you move into Sausalito?
What did I want in Sausalito?
Move.
How did you
When did you move to Sausalito?
Oh, I moved to Sausalito in 1991. So this is the longest I've lived anywhere. And I always wanted to come back to Sausalito. I lived in Sausalito for a little while when I first came here. A friend of a friend, very kindly, she had a studio apartment, and she separated her mattress and her, what do you call it?
Spring?
Yeah, anyway, I think she slept on the floor and I slept on. Anyway, I did that for a while. Then I went to Chicago and worked at Northwestern University for a while. Yeah, I did. But most of my time was spent as a volunteer in Marin.
I remember one of your favorite things was when you were working at the volunteer center and you were interviewing people, or you were volunteering at the volunteer center,
Yeah,
interviewing people to help them figure out what they wanted to do to volunteer.
that's right. That was a fantastic learning experience for me, because I would just have a 20 minutes or half an hour, and I had to ask the right questions to learn what people were really interested in, and find them a job to at least go and check out. That was great.
Did the Ellers have a question?
Yeah, I did. I'm curious, Ann, the involvement with the Environmental Forum.
Uh-huh.
And I was curious what the issues of the day were while you were on the board.
Oh, good question. Probably just about what they are now. I remember, some of you will remember Inca Benton, who was a member of UUCM for a long time, and she was also very involved with the Environmental Forum. And she was very concerned about water always. And I remember how she, had made a slideshow. So we would learn never to buy bottled water. I've never bought bottled water.
Good.
You should see Anne's trash can, and after a week, there's like one thing in it, one little thing.
And also one of the people on the board there was very involved in starting the recycling in Marin right from the get-go. So Alexandra will tell you, the kids grew up learning about recycling.
I arranged to have my daughter born on Earth Day.
Oh, nice touch.
Oh,
Good plan.
Now the forum was good involvement. Now it's so big. I was in the 5th class, I think. And now they're up to, 40 or something.
Wow.
It was very informal, and I met some incredible women and a few men too, but really, really interesting people. And the idea then was that you wanted to educate people who are in influential positions in the county to learn about the environment. So those were good years for me.
I think you should have taken it to the national level. We needed that voice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, is that it?
All right. And
Thank
thank you so
you.
much. Wonderful.
Thank you, Anne.
Isn't she remarkable?
Thank you for coming.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I think we left out a whole lot about my life.
So,
That's
After 86 years, there's a lot.
Yeah.
So great.
Yeah. About my joy of having little children and little grandchildren, and how much, I spent just being with them.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Anne.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And Gary saying thanks.
Bye.
thanks, Anne.
That's fun.
There's Mickey Mouse saying farewell.
Yeah.
Oh, it's lovely to see Alexandra. Lovely to see Alexandra.
Yeah.
He's squeaking.
I don't know.
Good job, Jim.
Father.
Okay.
You did the good job, not me.
Well, you did really well with
Ginny
the,
made lovely questions.
yeah.
Mr. Facilitator.
Yes.
So, and it does have to get edited, and it's going to take a couple of days. So even Karen will not get a copy of it for a couple of days. So just be patient.
Okay.
The video I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And is this the last remarkable people of the season?
No,
No.
we have one in 2 weeks.
Oh,
And
good.
that's Luca Cool.
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
that'd be interesting.
Yeah. Get a youngin in here.
And her dad too. He doesn't talk very much, but I bet he has something to say. Oh, well,
It'll be the two of them.
I don't know.
I doubt it very much. Okay, good night, everybody.
Good
Bye,
night.
Good night.
Happy Friday.
See ya.
Night. Good night, Ann.
Good night.